Today we're looking at a story about trust, communication, and what happens when someone you're about to marry shows you exactly who they are. This isn't just about a canceled wedding. It's about recognizing when respect has left the relationship entirely. Let's dive in. 16 days before I was supposed to get married, my fiancée vanished off the face of the earth, and when I finally found out where she was, I realized the wedding was the least of my problems. My phone stopped being a phone and became a source of pure dread because every time I looked at it, there was nothing, absolutely nothing from the woman I was supposed to marry in 2 weeks. I'm not some controlling guy who needs to know where his partner is every second of the day. I had a normal job as an accountant. We had a normal relationship. We fought about normal things like whose turn it was to do the dishes or whether we could afford the expensive wedding venue her mom wanted. Everything was planned. The tuxedo was hanging in my closet with the tags still on. The venue was booked, 200 guests had their invitations, and I had spent 3 months learning to dance for our first song because I didn't want to embarrass her. Nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, suggested that she would just disappear. It started on a Friday morning when she kissed me goodbye and said she was going to meet her maid of honor for some last-minute wedding stuff. Totally normal, except she never came home that night. The first few hours, I wasn't worried. I figured they were having fun, maybe grabbed dinner, lost track of time. But when midnight hit and my calls went straight to voicemail, something cold settled in my stomach. I sent a text, then another, then I called again, nothing. By 2 in the morning, I was sitting on our couch in the dark, phone in my hand, trying to convince myself that her battery died or she decided to crash at her friend's place. The next morning, still nothing. And that's when the real panic started, not the kind where you're annoyed, but the kind where your hands shake and you can't take a full breath because your brain is screaming that something terrible happened. I called her mom first, trying to keep my voice steady, and she answered on the third ring with this tone that was way too calm. She told me my fiancé was just busy with wedding preparations and that I should know how it is. I asked if she knew where exactly my fiancé was, and her mom got vague, said something about the girls having a special surprise planned and that I should just relax. Relax, like my fiancé hadn't been missing for over 24 hours. I called her dad next, and he was less diplomatic. He sounded irritated, told me I needed to give her some space and stop being so uptight. He actually said it was her last chance to have fun before settling down. And I remember thinking, settling down, like marrying me was some kind of prison sentence. I tried calling her bridesmaids, all 3 of them, and each conversation was weirdly similar. They all gave me the same runaround, said she was fine, said she deserved this, said I was overreacting. It felt like everyone had been handed the same script, and I was the only person who didn't get a copy. By Sunday night, I hadn't slept in 2 days. I called everyone I could think of, and the knot in my chest had turned into this hollow, sick feeling because something was very wrong, and everyone around me was pretending it wasn't. Sunday night around 11, I did something desperate. I opened Instagram through a web browser without logging in and started searching her friends' accounts. I figured if something bad had happened, someone would have posted about it, or if she was actually okay, maybe there'd be some clue about where she was. I found her maid of honor's account first, and my stomach dropped. There was my fiancé, posted 3 hours ago, very much alive, very much not kidnapped, at some beachfront bar with a drink in her hand and her arms around people I'd never seen before. The location tag said Miami Beach, which was over 1,000 miles from where we lived. I sat there staring at my phone screen, not believing what I was seeing. Because this wasn't a last-minute girls' night, this was a whole vacation. I went through her other bridesmaids' accounts, found more photos, her on a yacht, at a club, at some fancy restaurant, all of them tagged over the past 2 days while I'd been losing my mind thinking she was dead in a ditch somewhere. The sick feeling in my stomach turned into something else, something that felt like humiliation mixed with rage. Because she wasn't missing, she just didn't care enough to tell me. At 4 in the morning on Monday, she finally called, and I could hear club music blasting in the background, people laughing and shouting. She apologized for missing my calls like she was sorry for forgetting to pick up milk. I asked her where the hell she'd been, and she actually laughed, told me the girls planned this amazing surprise bachelorette trip. I asked her why she didn't tell me, why she let me think something happened to her, and her tone changed completely. I knew you'd freak out. That's why I didn't say anything, she said. She told me her bridesmaids had been planning this for months, that it was all paid for, that she'd known about it for weeks, and she specifically chose not to tell me because she thought I'd try to stop her. 2 weeks, she said. They'd be gone for 2 full weeks, getting back just 2 days before the wedding. I told her we had final meetings with the caterer, with the venue coordinator, with the photographer, all things she'd promised to handle with me. "You can deal with it. You're good at that stuff," she said, and I could hear her friends laughing in the background. When I told her this wasn't okay, that disappearing without a word wasn't normal, she called me controlling. "This is exactly why I didn't tell you. You're being so dramatic right now," she said. I heard someone yell her name, more laughter, and then she told me she had to go. "Don't blow up my phone, okay? I'm trying to have fun," she said, and before I could respond, the line went dead. 10 minutes later, I tried calling back and realized she'd blocked my number. I sat there in the dark living room of our apartment, still wearing the same clothes from 2 days ago, and I understood something that made my chest feel like it was caving in. This wasn't about a bachelorette party. This was about the fact that she'd made a choice to exclude me, to lie to me, to let me suffer, and then to blame me for having a normal human reaction. Her family knew, her friends knew, everyone knew except me, and they'd all decided that was perfectly fine. At that moment, I realized something that changed everything. To them, I wasn't her partner. I was an inconvenience, something to be managed and handled and kept in the dark. The woman I was supposed to marry in 13 days had just shown me exactly how much I mattered to her, and the answer was not at all. This first part reveals the real issue here. It's not about a trip or even the lies. It's about a complete breakdown of partnership. When everyone around you knows something you don't, and they've all agreed to keep you in the dark, that's not protection, that's conspiracy. The moment she chose to let him suffer instead of having an honest conversation, she showed him the exact dynamic their marriage would have had. The next morning, I woke up on the couch where I'd passed out around 6 a.m., and for about 3 seconds, everything felt normal. Then reality crashed down, and I remembered that my fiancée had blocked me and was partying in Miami while I was supposed to be finalizing our wedding. I made coffee with shaking hands, sat at our kitchen table, and stared at the wedding binder she'd put together. This massive thing filled with color-coded tabs and vendor contacts and seating charts. 13 days until the wedding, and the bride had just told me not to contact her because I was killing her vibe. I opened my laptop and looked at our joint bank account, saw the charges rolling in from Miami, bottle service, fancy dinners, a yacht rental that cost more than our monthly rent. She was spending our money we'd saved for the wedding and our future, on a trip she'd planned without telling me. That's when I made the decision. And I want to be clear, I didn't make it out of anger or revenge. I made it because I suddenly saw our future with perfect clarity, and it looked like me sitting alone in our apartment while she did whatever she wanted and called me controlling for having feelings about it. I pulled out her wedding binder and started calling vendors. And let me tell you, canceling a wedding 2 weeks out is its own special kind of nightmare. The venue coordinator sounded sympathetic until I mentioned the timeline. Then her voice went cold and professional. Their cancellation policy was brutal. I'd lose the entire deposit plus 20% of the total cost, about $8,000 just gone. The caterer was worse. They'd already ordered specialty ingredients for our menu, already scheduled staff. I was on the hook for 60% of the bill, even though no food would be served. The photographer had a no-refund policy for cancellations within 30 days, so that was another $3,000 down the drain. The florist, the DJ, the cake baker, every single call was the same. Sympathetic noises followed by inflexible policies and massive financial penalties. By noon, I'd hemorrhaged close to $20,000, and I hadn't even started on the smaller vendors. My hands were actually trembling as I transferred money and sent the emails, because this wasn't just money. This was the future we'd planned together, and I was watching it disintegrate in real time while she was probably on a beach somewhere not thinking about me at all. The hardest part was telling people, not the vendors, but the actual guests, the people who'd requested time off work and booked hotels and bought new outfits. I sent out a mass email because I couldn't handle 200 individual conversations, kept it simple and honest. I said the wedding was canceled, that my fiancé had left for a 2-week trip without telling me, and we were no longer getting married, and I apologized for any inconvenience. I hit send and immediately wanted to throw up because I knew what would happen next. People would talk and speculate and pick sides, and I just painted myself as either the victim or the villain, depending on who was telling the story. Within an hour, my phone started buzzing, texts from concerned friends, calls from confused relatives, and every single conversation required me to relive the humiliation of explaining that yes, my fiancé really did vanish, and no, I didn't know she was planning it, and yes, I know it sounds insane. Then her family started calling, and that's when things got truly ugly. Her mom called first, not to ask if I was okay, but to tell me I was making a huge mistake. She said her daughter was just nervous about the wedding. that this trip was her way of dealing with cold feet, that I was being unreasonable and punishing her for needing space. I pointed out that needing space usually involves a conversation, not a disappearing act and a blocked phone number, and her mom's voice got sharp. She told me I was going to regret this, that I was throwing away a good woman over one mistake, that everyone would see me as the bad guy who couldn't handle his fiancée having fun. Her dad called an hour later and didn't even pretend to be nice, just launched straight into telling me I was destroying their daughter's reputation and embarrassing their family. He said people were already talking, that I was making them look bad, and that if I had any decency I'd wait until his daughter got back to make any decisions. I told him his daughter had already made the decision when she planned a secret 2-week vacation and blocked my number, and he hung up on me. My own parents weren't much better. My mom called crying, asking why I couldn't just postpone instead of cancel, saying that all marriages have rough patches and this was just pre-wedding jitters. My dad told me I was being too proud, that sometimes you have to swallow your feelings for the sake of the relationship, that I was letting my ego ruin my future. I tried to explain that this wasn't about ego, it was about respect and trust and basic human decency, but he cut me off and said I'd understand when I was older, which was insane because I was 31 years old and apparently still getting lectured like a teenager. Even my friends were split, some were supportive, but others kept saying things like marriage is about compromise, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. The worst were her bridesmaids, who started bombarding me with texts calling me toxic and controlling and telling me I was ruining her life. One of them said I was probably relieved to have an excuse to bail, that I'd never really loved her anyway. And I remember staring at that text thinking, how did I become the villain in a story where I'm the one who got abandoned? About a week later, she came back early, and I found out later it was because her mom told her I'd actually canceled everything and she needed to fix it. I was at the apartment when I heard her key in the lock, and she walked in like she was coming home from the grocery store, not from blowing up our entire relationship. She looked tan and relaxed, and she smiled at me like nothing had changed. She asked what I'd been up to, casual as anything, and I told her I'd been canceling our wedding. The smile fell off her face so fast it would have been funny if the whole situation wasn't so devastating. She just stared at me, and I watched her cycle through confusion, then shock, then something that looked like genuine panic. She asked if I was serious, and I told her about the venue, the vendors, the emails to the guests, all of it. That's when the tears started, big dramatic sobs, and she asked how I could do this to her, how I could be so cruel, how I could humiliate her like this. I remember standing there feeling absolutely nothing, just this weird, empty calm, and I realized I'd cried all my tears over the past week, and now I was just done. She told me I'd ruined everything, that I'd embarrassed her in front of everyone she knew, that people were calling her family asking what happened, and she didn't know what to tell them. I asked her what she expected me to do, wait around for 2 weeks while she partied, and then pretend everything was fine, and she actually said yes. She said it was just a trip, just a vacation, that I was blowing everything out of proportion and making it into something it wasn't. I told her it stopped being just a trip when she lied about it, when she let me think she was missing, when she blocked my number and called me controlling for being upset. She switched tactics then, got angry instead of sad, started yelling that I was punishing her for having friends and wanting to enjoy herself before being tied down. Tied down? Those were her actual words, like our marriage was a prison sentence she was trying to delay. She said I'd always been jealous of her friendships, always tried to control who she spent time with, and now I was using this as an excuse to manipulate her. I just looked at her and thought about how I'd spent 3 months learning to dance so I wouldn't embarrass her at our wedding, how I'd worked overtime to pay for the honeymoon she wanted, and I realized I didn't know this person at all. She left that night, said she was staying with her parents, and I just nodded because there was nothing left to say. I sat alone in our apartment surrounded by half-packed boxes and canceled contracts, and I understood something that should have been obvious from the start. All these people telling me to forgive and forget, telling me I was overreacting, none of them actually cared about what was right or fair or healthy. They just wanted me to be convenient, to smile and play along and make everything easy for everyone else. And the moment I refused, I became the problem. What we see in this part is the cost of setting boundaries. He lost $20,000, faced pressure from everyone he knew, and still stood his ground because he understood something crucial. Being alone is better than being with someone who treats you like an obstacle. Notice how every single person prioritized her comfort over his dignity. That's not support, that's enabling. The next few weeks were absolutely surreal, like watching someone rewrite history in real time and being powerless to stop it. My ex-fiancée launched a full-scale campaign to make me look like the villain, and she was incredibly effective at it. She told everyone who would listen that I was controlling and manipulative, that I'd always been jealous of her friendships, that I'd used one innocent trip as an excuse to humiliate her and destroy her reputation. She posted on social media about toxic relationships and red flags, never mentioning me by name, but making it crystal clear who she was talking about. Her friends shared the posts, added their own commentary about dodging bullets and recognizing abuse, and suddenly I was getting messages from people I barely knew telling me I was a terrible person. The crazy thing was watching people I'd known for years, people who'd seen our relationship up close, start to believe her version of events. Some of them genuinely thought I'd overreacted, that canceling a wedding over a bachelorette party was extreme and vindictive. Others just didn't want to deal with the drama of picking sides, so they quietly distanced themselves from both of us, which somehow felt worse than the ones who actively took her side. The practical side of the breakup was its own nightmare. We'd been living together for 3 years and our lives were completely tangled up. We had a lease on our apartment with 8 months left, joint utilities, a shared credit card we'd opened for wedding expenses that now had a balance of over $15,000. She refused to contribute to any of it, said that since I was the one who canceled the wedding, I should be the one to pay off the credit card and handle all the bills. I pointed out that the wedding got canceled because she disappeared and lied to me, and she actually laughed and said I was still trying to control the narrative. Her dad called me 2 days later and offered to buy out my half of the lease if I just moved out and left her alone. And the way he said it made it clear this was about making me disappear, not about being fair. I took the offer because I was exhausted and didn't want to fight anymore, even though it meant losing my deposit and basically paying to escape my own life. I moved my stuff into my brother's spare room over a weekend while she was conveniently staying at her parents' place. And I remember packing up 3 years of my life into boxes and thinking about how none of this would have happened if she'd just been honest with me from the start. About 6 weeks after everything fell apart, she showed up at my work, and I knew immediately something was different because she brought her sister with her as backup. They waited in the parking lot until my shift ended, and when I walked out and saw them standing by my car, my stomach dropped. My ex looked like she'd been crying, red eyes and messy hair, the whole performance. She said she needed closure, that we needed to talk about what happened like adults, and her sister just stood there nodding like a backup singer. I told her we didn't have anything to talk about, that she'd made her choices and I'd made mine. And she actually had the nerve to say I owed her a conversation after everything I'd put her through. Everything I'd put her through, like I was the one who'd vanished and lied and blown up our relationship. Her sister jumped in then, said her family was worried about her, that she'd been devastated by how I'd treated her, that the least I could do was give her some peace of mind. I looked at my ex and asked her point blank what she wanted from me. An apology, forgiveness, what? She said she just wanted me to admit that I'd overreacted, that I'd let my insecurity ruin something good, that if I'd just trusted her none of this would have happened. That's when something in me just snapped, not in an angry way, but in a clear, final way. I told her the truth, told her I knew she'd been lying from the start, that a 2-week bachelorette party to Miami wasn't normal, that blocking your fiancé's number and calling him dramatic wasn't normal, that letting someone think you're missing wasn't a funny prank or an innocent mistake. I said I didn't care anymore about her version of events or what people thought of me, that I'd made peace with being the bad guy in her story because at least I could sleep at night knowing I'd respected myself enough to walk away. She started crying harder, real tears this time I think, and she said something that finally made everything make sense. She said she'd been terrified of getting married, that the closer the wedding got the more trapped she felt, and she'd hoped that if she pushed me hard enough I'd be the one to call it off, so she wouldn't have to be the bad guy. She said the trip wasn't really about having fun, it was about testing me, seeing if I'd finally snap and give her an out. Her sister looked shocked, clearly hadn't known this part, and I just felt this wave of exhaustion wash over me because even now, even with the truth finally out, she was still trying to make it my fault for not playing along. I got in my car and drove away, and that was the last real conversation we ever had. Over the next few months, I heard things through mutual friends, little updates I never asked for, but somehow always received. Apparently, she'd been seeing someone during that Miami trip, nothing serious supposedly, but enough that her bridesmaids had known and kept quiet about it. The whole thing had been framed as her last chance to have fun, but really it was her chance to be with someone else without technically cheating since we weren't married yet. Some of her friends felt guilty once the truth came out, and tried to reach out to apologize, but I didn't respond because what was the point? The damage was done, and their apologies didn't change the fact that they participated in gaslighting me while I was having panic attacks, thinking my fiancé was dead. My ex moved to a different city about 8 months later, fresh start apparently, and I was relieved because it meant I could stop accidentally running into her at the grocery store or the gym. About a year after everything ended, I was at a coffee shop working on my laptop when she walked in with some guy. They looked comfortable with each other, happy, and I waited for some feeling to hit me, anger or sadness or regret. Nothing came, just this distant observation that she existed and I existed, and we weren't part of each other's lives anymore. She spotted me eventually, and I watched her face go through this whole journey of emotions, but she didn't come over, and I didn't wave. We just looked at each other for a second, two people who used to plan a whole life together, and then she looked away and ordered her coffee. I finished my work and left, and walking to my car, I realized something important. I hadn't forgiven her, probably never would, but I'd stopped carrying her around in my head. She'd wanted me to be the villain so badly that she'd rewritten our entire relationship to make it true, and for a while I'd let that story define me. But I understood now that her story was just that, her story, and I had my own version where I wasn't the bad guy or the victim. I was just someone who'd chosen to respect himself enough to walk away from someone who didn't value him. I didn't know her anything anymore, and that realization felt like finally putting down something heavy I'd been carrying for way too long. Here's what this story teaches us. Sometimes the trash takes itself out, but only if you let it. He could have ignored every red flag, married her anyway, and spent years wondering why he felt so alone in his own relationship. Instead, he chose temporary pain over permanent regret. The real victory wasn't proving he was right. It was reaching a place where he didn't need to anymore. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think he made the right call canceling the wedding? Or should he have waited for her to come back and talked it through first? And here's the bigger question. At what point does a relationship cross the line from fixable to completely done? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one.